like if I had a problem or I needed to make a decision, I would take my journal and I'd go to a quiet place and I'd make pros and cons lists over and
Mhm.
over and over again.
Oh, yes.
They never led me to an answer. It was just driving. I was driving myself bonkers. It was just literally,
The
yeah, I don't know.
rumination.
The rumination, and it's just getting
Uh,
stuck in the thinking. And I remember too when I had that shift, and it's really when I started practicing more mindfulness where I realized, oh my gosh, like there's so much wisdom that lives underneath my thoughts, like in my body. And that's I write about that in my book too, getting back in touch with that inner wisdom and how our body gives us so much information about where we're at and what we need to do, and we're just trained out of paying attention to that and putting much more stock in our thoughts than we should or we need to. So I think, you asked, well, how do we get out of that? I think different practices work for different people, but mindfulness, practicing meditation for me was a huge pivotal shift.
I mean, is that something you think everybody should be doing, or is there particular issues that you see that that people come to you with? Because a lot of people kind of going, "Oh no, I've got to this. This is my problem. I've got to deal with it." But do
Mhm.
you see the same kind of problems that people have lost connections, and is there
Mhm.
similarities with what people come to see you about?
Yeah, I work with a lot of people who have anxiety and depression, and so there is a lot of overlap at this point, with specific clients that I work with. And in terms of one size fitting all, that's something that as a therapist and getting older in my own life, like I don't think we can ever say that. I don't think this is the one
Definitely.
answer for everyone, and there's certainly research that supports that it can be counter indicated for some people. And so I think that I don't, and I think that when we have this idea of like, oh, this works for everyone, why isn't it working for me, then that can lead us down a whole other rabbit hole, of shame and self-deprecation. Why isn't this good for me? So I can't, I think that there are some people that it works for, like myself, it was really huge. And I write a lot about it because of that. And I think for some people, it might not be the answer, but there's other ways of accessing the ability to be intentional and present in our life than a formal mindfulness practice.
I mean, do you see kind of the standard symptoms? Because for me, I notice things like my flat used to get dirty, or I would stop going social. I would
Hmm.
stop doing certain things, and it was a slow progression. And then suddenly it hit you, and you were like, before you knew it, you're in the throes and the end of the world. And do you see kind of red flags that people can watch out for? Is there a way we can kind of suggest to people what seasonal affliction disorder, what is maybe getting towards clinical and needs like
Hmm.
medical intervention? Is there a way to kind of spot
Hmm.
potential problems?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a multi-layered answer, and I think that it's a big question with a big answer. And I think developing self-awareness is our best bet in identifying things earlier. So learning to check in with ourselves, like the three-way, I always like this three-way triangle of check-in where we ask ourselves, how are my thoughts? What am I thinking? What's going on in my brain? How am I feeling? What emotions am I having? And how's my body feeling? So it's a
Mhm.
three-way check-in, and it leads to really great self-awareness. Like, what am I thinking? How am I feeling? And how's my body doing? And like I was saying before, so often we're so busy that we just don't catch the small clues until it becomes so big and so loud that we just can't ignore it anymore, like physical pain in our bodies.